Downton Abbey, A New Era, written by Julian Fellowes and directed by Simon Curtis, is the latest installment in the Crawley family saga. In this episode of Costume is Character, I spoke with the Downton Abbey, A New Era costume designer, Anna Robbins, who also designed costumes on the later seasons of the show and the first film. She's been working with these characters for a long, long time. And we sat down to talk about how each of the costumes speaks to the characters and the transitional phases that they find themselves within this movie. Itself sort of jumps back and forth between the Crawleys that have remained at Downton and the Crawleys that have gone to the French Riviera. And for the Crawleys that have remained at Downton, the thing that they're dealing with is the fact that a movie shoot is happening in their home. And it's at a point in time in the film industry when silent films are being phased out and talkies are becoming more and more popular. So you've got all of these elements of transition, right? So you've got Downton trying to transition into a modern era, the house is falling apart, they need the money. You've got the silent film stars who are now trying to transition into becoming talking film stars. And both of those transition periods are now colliding with each other. And that becomes really, really evident in the costume design between you've got all of the staff at Downton, you've got the people who have remained, so in particular you've got Mary, she's kind of the pivotal character in that bit, and Myrna Dalgleish, played by Laura Haddock, who is the silent film star who is particularly anxious about her career because she has a very thick London accent. So when you look at Myrna and Mary, you have these two women who are operating visually in very different spaces because Mary is personally transitioning into becoming the dowager. She's going to be the person who is in charge of Downton and carrying that legacy, not only of the family name, but the physical property into the future. And her outfits in this film are much more, I don't even want to say demure, but they are a little bit more mature. She's wearing silhouettes that aren't as physically flattering or sensual. And then on the other side, you have Myrna in these, long silky things with big fur cuffs, and she's beautiful and she radiates a sensuality to her. But the women themselves aren't that different because they're both in these transitional periods of their lives. And it's interesting to see how the costumes reflect where their transitions are going. The Hollywood element of it and Myrna's development as an actress is also interesting because the people that she connects most well with are the staff, because she comes from a working class background. And the way that she presents herself and the things that she wears help her create the persona of this rarefied actress that she's trying so desperately to be and is so afraid she's not going to be able to be anymore. Similarly for Mary, she's dressing in this more reserved, mature way in terms of how she wants to be perceived as the captain of Downton now, and it becomes this kind of aspirational dressing. You dress for the part you want, and that's what both of these women are doing in very different but similar ways.
This dress of Cora's is Fortuny printed velvet. And I adore Fortuny, and they printed this velvet for us, and
wow.
And it was about finding the right kind of weight of velvet and handle of the velvet so that it felt vintage, and then draping it and working on the stand to create Cora proportions and making it feel like it was hers for quite a critical, quite key scene for Cora. So that's maybe a favourite make. Bridal, is always a favourite.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's really difficult. I managed to pick these, but I could have picked another 10 or another 10 or another 10, and then they would possibly feel like my favourites at that point. I don't know, it's just a glorious era to design for and to kind of find these treasures.
So obviously, as Anna said, it's very hard to pick a favorite costume. I have my own favorite, which we will get into in a minute, but one of the ones that Anna mentioned was the printed velvet dress that Cora wears at quite a pivotal moment. Now, obviously, we're going to talk about what that moment actually was. So when some of the Crawleys have gone to the south of France to investigate this whole villa inheritance situation. Once that's been resolved, there's a big party, but Cora has spent the whole trip kind of being unwell, and people around her are concerned, but she's not really giving anything away, which plays a lot into the character. She is, even though she's forward, she's also self-reserved, so she keeps her cards close to the vest. Finally, she's convinced by Edith to tell her husband, Lord Grantham, what's going on. So that moment is very interesting because she's being vulnerable. She's wearing this dress that, in the context of the party scene, fits right in really well, which, you know, they play a lot with the English fashion versus the French fashion. And as an American, as someone who's a little bit outside, Cora's always got a very interesting dress sensibility about her. So you have this moment where she's being very vulnerable, and Elizabeth McGovern is such a fantastic actress that you can see the vulnerability come out emotionally in terms of her dialogue, but also physically in the way she's carrying herself. And a lot of that is also down to the weight of that dress, because you have this printed velvet. It's a weighty fabric to it. It's a tactile fabric. It's something that begs to be touched, and you feel it when you wear it, right? It has a different weight, it has a different feeling. That relationship between fabric and body really, I think, plays into her vulnerability about being ill. And you remember she ran a hospital, so she's clever. She knows that she's unwell, and she knows how bad it could be. And so when you think about those sensations, the physical sensations that the character is experiencing wearing that dress, I mean, we've all been sick, and you know what it's like when you feel something and you're like, oh God, my skin hurts. And all of those things come forward when you think about the fact that she's put on this heavy, beautiful, luxurious dress, and then how she physically feels inside of that. In terms of kind of the costumes, obviously we've got some wonderful ones here. Were there any of these that were kind of your favorite or more difficult or interesting to work with?
I mean, picking a favourite costume is like asking me to pick my favourite child and is nigh on impossible. You've got Lady Edith's jacket here, where I knew as soon as I saw it, I was going to be able to pair it with trousers and make that sort of sartorial, point that she is embracing this
this
incredible
feels super modern to me. When I look at this, I'm like, I would pick that up and I would wear that in a
And that was
heartbeat.
very much part of the plan, was that we're making that step forward that says we're about to enter the 30s, like we're finding these new looks. And it was going to jump out at people, and therefore it should feel as contemporary as we can. Whilst it's still very accurate in terms of cut and proportion for that 1928 point. But yeah, that jacket was an incredible find.
My favorite costume is the one that Anna points out at one point, and I think I even say it in the interview, I was like, I would absolutely wear this, and it's a white kind of jumpsuit, hello. But it's also this kind of like kimono style jacket in kind of like a burnt orangey and blues and stuff like that. And it looks so modern, and I saw that and I instantly was like, oh my God, I would 100% pick that up in a store. And I saw the costume before I saw the film. And so then when you see the scene that Edith is wearing that in, it's all about how she's trying to get back to her sense of independence as a working woman, as someone who has an identity in herself separate to being a mother. And so it's really interesting that you see her wearing trousers and these kind of looser, more free-flowing fabrics. They're silky. And obviously she's in the French Riviera, so there is that element of the heat. So obviously you want to be wearing lighter clothes, and we will touch on those themes in a second. But for Edith, she's wearing a costume that speaks to the woman she wants to get back to being, which is this, she's a journalist, she's forward thinking, she's spent a lot of the show being, unsure of herself and not feeling like she was enough. She's a middle child, classic middle child syndrome, and now she's come into herself. But then she gets a kind of, I don't want to say a knock, because lots of women love motherhood and feel that it gives them a sense of identity, but it is complex. And for her, she says it outright in the film that she missed this part of herself. She missed being able to be intellectual and to stimulate that part of who she is. And that is so obvious in the choice of outfit that she wears. And she puts it on while she's taking photographs and she's doing all this kind of work stuff. And to draw the link so clearly between gender, because obviously she's wearing trousers, which is still not the done thing for that family. As you know, we're entering the 30s and 40s, and women are starting to dress more in that vein. She's ahead of that cusp. She's ahead of that trend, and she's using that she's dressing the part, right? Fake it till you make it, except she has made it. So she's getting back into the swing of that. And so you get this really, and it's only a small moment, but it's very poignant to see her grapple with something that is such a timeless issue for lots of women, particularly becoming mothers, of marrying work-life identity with motherhood and identity. And it's very beautiful. And also it's just visually, it's such a gorgeous outfit. And again, it is something that you would see nowadays and you'd be like, I would wear that, and I would wear that. Anna, if you want to lend me the costume, I take it.
Welcome to the Villa of the Doves. It's a beautiful place.
How happy you must be.
Oh, my goodness.
Who is she?
The Lady Grantham I first went to work for.
Granny.
Why did you invite us here?
So for the half of the Crawleys that have gone to France, there's a very kind of obvious difference between the British fish out of water and the kind of more relaxed Mediterranean. And the entire Downton establishment is based on class rules. And those class rules are so very easily defined by what the characters wear. All of the staff wear their uniforms, and all of the Crawleys and their kind of extended family are in these, luxurious, beautiful outfits. Now, when you take all of that and you transplant it into the Mediterranean, where there are class issues there, but they're less visually defined, you begin to tease out how the characters kind of buy into their own strictures. And in particular, you have Carson, who refuses to wear anything but his bajillion layered wool suit in the Mediterranean in the summer. It's 40 degrees and the man is sweltering, and he refuses to change because that's just not what's done. And so you see how these clothes become defining for the characters in not only who they are, but their station in life. And breaking out of that is very, very difficult because it takes courage. And the society that Downton exists in doesn't reward you for that. That's not something that is expected or done. And while the whole Downton Abbey, the show and the films themselves are fantasy, it's a very rose-tinted look at what society was like in those days. For the film itself, you see Carson really struggling with change. Whether it's the fact that the house needs repair, or the fact that they're filming something there, or the fact that he now has to go to the south of France in the summer, which is just unthinkable. Which for us, it's yes, I would happily go to the south of France in the summer. Thank you very much. So all of that comes down to his costume, his clothes that he wears, and it becomes, he's sweating and gross, and everyone's like, would he not prefer a linen suit? And he's like, no, I would not. So he would rather be physically uncomfortable than change. And it's interesting to see the characters that are more able to change and how their progress is marked by their clothes, like with Edith and with Mary and Myrna in terms of the way that they're dressing for the parts that they want in life. And then you have Carson, who can't. He literally cannot do that, and he would rather die of heat stroke than wear a linen suit.
They better be warned. The British are coming.
If you liked this episode of Costume is Character, be sure to check back next week where we delve into Pablo Larraín's Spencer. And if there's any other films or costumes or costume designers you want us to talk about, or hopefully talk to, let us know in the comments. And if you want more Digital Spy content, you can always like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you so much for watching.